order to bring you the following KOTV special feature.
Now that we've adjusted this old set just right, it's time to gather your friends and family around the TV. It's 1949, and television comes to Tulsa. Tulsa newspapers trumpeted the beginning of an American adventure, a post-war dream that came true. KOTV, the first television station in Tulsa to bring you the wonderland of sight and sound.
This month, KOTV has been making news, just as it has countless of times since the fall of 1949.
And now in 1999, KOTV makes news by celebrating 50 years of television in Tulsa. Through 5 decades, you've welcomed us into your home. And we've shared so many moments, made so many memories. We took countless coffee breaks, gossiped with the ladies, read a book with Louis Meyer, laughed with Lee and Lionel, danced with the in-crowd, and brought you the news that would shape your life. You've welcomed us as a friend and wished well those of us who moved on to other places. Clayton Vaughn, Bob Brown, Betty Boyd, Jim Hartz, Lee Woodward, and many others.
Whether we are your new friends or old acquaintances, we bid you a hearty welcome tonight, as always, and invite you to watch as we create for you the picture of a pioneer.
KOTV's 50th anniversary. Television comes to Tulsa. Now, here's your host, Scott Thompson.
Welcome to KOTV's 50th anniversary celebration. In October 1949, KOTV sent out northeastern Oklahoma's first wobbly, scratchy television signal from a tower that stood atop Tulsa's First National Bank building. 1949, that was the year President Truman began his second term and Communist China began its first year. A gallon of gas cost 27 cents, and a new dress from Sears would set you back almost $9. A new television set, if you could find one, could cost as much as $600, though you could get by for less. And on November 30th, 1949, when KOTV broadcast the first picture that you could see on that television set, we were one of the first stations in the United States, a pioneer. KOTV would remain the only TV station in Tulsa for 5 years, and the station of choice for half a century now. During the next hour, we'll remember some of your favorite programs, reminisce with some dear old friends, and remind ourselves again of the astounding power of television to inform, entertain, and create lasting memories. For KOTV, then as now, it's all come from this converted truck dealership at the corner of 3rd Street and Frankfurt Avenue in downtown Tulsa.
Our Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for the consecrated skills of the engineers and the patience that makes possible this great endeavor.
50 years ago, they cemented over the grease pit, said a prayer, and had themselves a television station when the International Harvester dealership gave way to the country's largest TV studio. But in the beginning, most of the time, a test pattern was the picture. Our broadcast day didn't begin until 12:30 in the afternoon. KOTV was the only game in town and could choose programming from 5 networks. But that filled just 3 hours in the evening. So to fill that big studio, Channel 6 had to come up with its own programs. Lookin' at Cookin', a daily taste of the latest recipes, was born that first year.
There's a Lookin' at Cookin' set, and some of the ladies who have been on that famous program that's been on longer than any other continuous program Monday through Friday series.
Lookin' at Cookin' was sponsored by Oklahoma Natural Gas Company as a way to sell gas appliances.
When we started Lookin' at Cookin' 5 years ago, we didn't know how popular the program would be, but it has been a lot of fun.
Cooking and television have always been a perfect fit. Even though Lookin' at Cookin' was pared down to 5 minutes and renamed Coffee Break, it still enjoyed a 32-year run. Donnell Green was the last host until the kitchen closed for good in 1981.
I think baked fudge was a favorite of a lot of people. It seems like the dessert recipes were always very, very popular. Potatoes Romanoff was very popular.
And in those early days, Don Scott was a hit with the kids. He'd corral the little varmints every afternoon with cowboy movies.
You know, I'll tell you, I haven't seen so many people gathered in one place since the last time the creeks went up. But we're having a pretty good time, and we hope you cowhands at home are having a good time, too.
Channel 6 was a happy-go-lucky place back then. Everything was done live, none of it preserved on tape or film. We had a game show, charades, and another called Wishing Well. That's Bob Hauer, who also doubled as Tulsa's first television anchorman.
I just read wire copy. There were no visuals. It had to be really primitive, pretty dull. And that sign that you see that says news desk in 3-inch letters, when I would throw it to Harry Volkman, who later became a big weatherman in Chicago, I would change that sign to say sports desk and do the sports.
Harry Volkman was Tulsa's first weatherman, forecasting with just a sheet of paper and a marker. Harry's still working at TV weather in Chicago.
I got the information from shortwave radio in Morse code, in weather code, and I copied that because I had been trained for that in the United States Army. And so I bought the surplus radio receiver, put the earphones on, listened to all the code, all that stuff, and drew the map.
There was drawing for fun and cooking for fun. How about fishing and Your Dog and Mine, The Singing Peddler and Two Maids of Music. And there was a wrestling ring set up here, of course. Wrestling's always been a TV staple. So was the Woman's Page, first hosted by Barbara Smith.
My job as editor of the Woman's Page is to appear each morning at 11 o'clock with news and views from a woman's point of view. We try to talk and gossip about everything that's of interest to women. And, of course, I do a lot of interviews. Famous people coming to Tulsa, people that I think the women would like to meet.
By 1955, a new face was writing the Woman's Page, though Betty Boyd insisted she wouldn't do any cooking.
I knew I didn't want to do that because I thought those women at home in the daytime already know how to beat an egg. I don't need to show them. I want to bring them something to their lives that they can sit down and say, well, I could have talked to her like that or him like that on television. Isn't that fun?
Betty got sick to her stomach the first day she went on live television with the Woman's Page. The first day of what would become a 25-year career as one of Tulsa's best-loved TV personalities.
KOTV gave me a wonderful opportunity, and bless their hearts, I don't know why they did it, because I had no training, no talent. I didn't have anything but a gray streak in my hair, and I guess they thought that was cute. I'm not sure.
Oral Roberts got his television start on KOTV, an association that continued into the 1990s. In fact, Channel 6 broadcast services every Sunday from a different downtown church with a bread truck that had been made into a mobile studio. By 1957, Channel 6 had a morning show.
It was just a variety program. We had local people, that prominent people in the city that we could interview. We'd have some talent shows that come in, some of it very bad.
Hosted first by Bob Mills, it was Bill Hayden who took Sunup into the 1960s.
But we were winging it every morning, seems like, with what we had, and we were going up against the Today Show at that time.
So women in bathing suits were brought in to give the weather report. And in 1964, staff announcer Lee Woodward became the program's host. Lee already had a following in Tulsa, thanks to a little lion puppet he found at the station one day.
I found it up there and started playing with it and trying voices, and one thing led to another.
It led to King Lionel's Court, which looked like a kid's show, but drew a huge audience of grown-ups, too.
The absolutely amazing thing to me is here, it is 1999. I've been on since '83. And really didn't use the lion the last 2 or 3 years of that. People come up to me every day and ask how Lionel is, or how you doing, where's Lionel?
Lee Woodward was KOTV's all-around host in the 1960s. He was even there when Dance Party was born one Saturday afternoon. It was Tulsa's answer to Dick Clark's Bandstand, just more popular. High school kids dancing to the latest hits. And on New Year's Eve, 1965, that little Pepsi dispenser that sat on the set welcomed a new host.
Hi, this is Lee Bailey. Don't miss it. This Saturday, Dance Party in color on KOTV.
KAKC Radio's Lee Bailey would take Dance Party into the 1970s.
We needed to loosen it up, give it a disc jockey, hit music kind of a feel, and an attitude of this is show and tell for Tulsa teens and music industry.
And boy, was it ever. Did you dance on the show, or just tune in to catch the lively ones, Pepsi dancers? Remember when Herman's Hermits dropped by? The Dave Clark Five, Paul Revere and the Raiders? the Temptations.
We were having college riots, we were having demonstrations, we were having sit-ins, we were having all of that. And in the middle of all of this was this one show that said, hey folks, wait a minute. These are really good kids. Let's put them on television, let's have some fun.
It was the hippest destination on the station that was boss.
In Tulsa, we had higher ratings than Dick Clark did. And not because we were better, we were local. They could turn on Channel 6 and KOTV, and they could see kids from Bartlesville, Miami, Memorial, Edison, Hale, Booker T. Washington, McLean, all those high schools, and see kids they know.
By the 1970s, CBS was filling most of KOTV's broadcast day, local news the rest. There was still a place for memorable moments, though.
I have no knowledge of that whatsoever. I don't recall ever playing Kris Kringle.
In 1970, KOTV camera operator Gaylord Sartain hatched the hugely successful Dr. Mazeppa Papazoides Uncanny Film Festival and Camp Meeting. Comedy sketches sandwiched between horror movies.
You know, I mean, I used to do the show, and then when it was over, grab a broom and sweep it out and get ready to do man the camera. I mean, I was still a cameraman when I was doing this. Yeah. So I had 2 huge salaries coming in.
Through all these 50 years, the names and faces that came with those memorable programs stay with us. As meaningful as they became to us, KOTV, too, was and will always be a part of them. Pioneers together.
But the most rewarding thing otherwise, which has happened in recent years, not so much back then, and the way that people say thank you for the thing you did or the fun and so forth. And that's kind of neat.
I've always considered Channel 6 my home base as far as that's concerned, the place that I got my start and the place where I got the best advice I've ever had, which was just be yourself.
Some of the best years of my life there.
They not only entertained us, but also informed and educated us. Later, we'll check in with some of the folks you invited into your homes night after night. Next, Tulsa's Dean of Television with 50 years of excellence in journalism. KOTV's 50th anniversary, brought to you by Public Service Company of Oklahoma, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma, and Cleartone.
At PSO, we've built quite a reputation for providing safe, reliable electricity. But of course, there are times when Mother Nature messes things up a bit. And when that happens, it's good to know that we can be reached 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and that our service crews won't rest until the power has been restored. Because at PSO, we know you're counting on us, just as you are each other.
Hello, I'm Bob Howard. 50 years ago, when I started in television, TVs were huge. Few people had them, but they were big. Technology, of course, has changed, and they've become smaller and more sophisticated. The same thing is true of hearing aids. For instance, the capsule at Cleartone. So small you can hardly see it, but they make them just for you. That's at Cleartone. Give them a call.
Hi, I'm Josh. I played football at Haskell. Every season, I have a lot of injuries. Knees and ankles and things that my doctor at Springer Clinic takes care of. I'd like to say that running the stadium steps was part of my rehab program prescribed by Springer. But actually, I missed practice, and I'm being punished.
My son needed emergency surgery. It was 2 in the morning. We must have been about 800 miles away from home. But my kid's doing okay now, thanks to some great doctors. We're sure glad we had Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma offers you the largest network in the state. More doctors, more hospitals and healthcare professionals, more choices. So when it comes to health insurance, don't assume anything. Always choose Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma.
As a teacher and a parent, I have a unique perspective. I see what our students need, and I see what my own children need. We need new classrooms, new books, new buses, air conditioning for our gyms. There's so many things that this new bond issue will bring us, and it will do that without raising any new taxes.
Do it for the kids. Do it for us. Do it for me.
Do it for the kids. Vote yes with no tax increase, Tuesday, November 9th.
A lot of journalists have come through the KOTV newsroom. Some went on to bigger cities and bigger fame. But one man made his mark here. Clayton Vaughn became Tulsa's most respected broadcast journalist during more than 30 years with KOTV. Clayton helped shape Channel 6's commitment to quality journalism. And a celebration of 50 years wouldn't be complete without remembering his many contributions.
This is the KOTV Evening News with Clayton Vaughn.
Good evening. Here are the headlines in tonight's news.
Clayton Vaughn came out of radio, as most television newsmen of his day did. Jim Hartz, who anchored our 6 o'clock news then, was on his way to New York and the Today Show. The only way KOTV would release Jim from his contract was if he could find his replacement. He found Clayton.
The first thing I ever did on the air was an election that we did a remote on. And I was the guy at the county courthouse. We lugged one of the big studio cameras down there and set it up, ran a cable all the way back from the courthouse to the station.
The equipment was clunky for sure, but television news was coming into its own. Still, Clayton knew the technology of television shouldn't interfere with the basics of journalism. Get it first if you could, but by all means, get it right. There was an obligation that came with reporting the news, and for the small group that churned it out each day from the KOTV newsroom, it was an exhilarating time.
Clayton headed one of the first local hour-long news broadcasts in the country. Instead of doing it by formula, he really opened up the time for us and let us experiment with form and content in terms of taking the time we really thought we needed to do a story.
Bob Brown would go on to ABC News and the news magazine 2020 and carry with him the influences of Clayton Vaughn.
I was the news director, the assignment editor, the anchor, and the producer for the hour.
At Clayton's urging, KOTV was the first Tulsa television station to cover the building civil rights movement. Mike Flynn, who also broke new ground as Tulsa's first environmental reporter, remembers when a busload of civil rights workers was bound for Tulsa, and the pressure to ignore them that came from some prominent community leaders.
I was very proud of Clayton at that point because he said, we cannot do that. We can't deliberately control what people hear. We have to trust in the community that when they hear the truth, they'll do the right thing. And that was one of the reasons that I liked working for Clayton, because he had that kind of judgment and that kind of wisdom.
It was under Clayton's watch that KOTV hired Tulsa's first African-American news anchor, Dale Hogg.
What it said to the community was, here is, a young black African-American, who could accept this task, and I thought did a fairly good job, not frankly being trained in the media.
Today, Dale Hogg is an executive with a satellite telephone company in Washington, D.C. His career path first cut at Channel 6.
I will never forget those people because they opened the door for not only me, but for people of my race that I think it would have been years in coming had they not done that.
Clayton came to be known as the Dean of Tulsa Television. In September, he was inducted into the Heartland Emmy Chapter's Silver Circle in recognition of his many contributions to broadcasting.
If KOTV did anything that was unique during the time that I was here, it was that what we were doing was serious, but that we didn't take ourselves quite so seriously, and realized that there are many positive things going on in the community, and if we can reflect that, then we've done a better job.
As Clayton led the way in quality reporting, a number of outstanding journalists have worked out of this old garage.
From the first newscast through today's broadcast, KOTV has committed itself to outstanding, award-winning journalism. Through the years, it's meant more than just covering the news. It's been the dedication to educate and to inform. April 19th, 1995, Oklahoma City. Two women, Glenda Sylvie and Terry Hood, were at work at the site of the bombing by 5 o'clock that evening. They began what would become weeks of daily wall-to-wall coverage. Women news anchors in pairs were a rarity then and now on the local TV evening news in America. It was and is outside the box, but not on KOTV News. Not then, not now. And it's a recent example of an attitude that's never been in place as policy, but has never been missing in practice. I don't even know what to call it. If it's the best way we can do it, let's try it. Maybe close. That had to be balanced, of course, by the safer if it's not broken, don't fix it. But television news is an environment of constantly changing technology and people. If women are not a rarity now, they were more than 30 years ago in Tulsa when Georgia Jones broke the local TV news on-air gender barrier.
It enabled me to interview people who were perhaps not city fathers, but they were the citizens who were working so hard to help those either through the arts or through the social services who desperately needed help.
Dale Hogg did for African Americans what Georgia did for women. The year was 1970.
I honestly didn't realize just how significant that kind of exposure would be. But to me, the most significant thing was that it opened eyes and doors.
It would take another 16 years before a black female news director was named in a major American TV market. Her name was Paula Walker. She worked here. It wasn't that diverse in 1949 when a young staff announcer, Bob Hauer, read Tulsa's first television newscasts. And news production stayed simple in those early years.
Good evening, everyone. This is Cy Tuma, news editor of KOTV, and tonight...
Tuma's watch included a Tulsa journalism landmark. The Tulsa Tribune put out its last bulletin edition for the Coliseum fire, but that day was the beginning of the end for afternoon papers, victims of TV's live coverage of breaking news, and if it's the best way we can do it, let's try it.
Working at KOTV probably was the best time in my early life. We had a marvelous time. I was given a lot of opportunities.
When Jim Hartz was here, the opportunities in the early 60s came because of small staffs and technology everyone had to learn from scratch. TV news remains out on the edge of the technological learning curve. Combine that with, if it's the best way we can do it, let's try it, and you saw the result last spring when tornadoes raked the state. Oklahomans know it wasn't always so. Not that many years ago, there was no TV radar, no color film or videotape, no satellites, and worse than all those put together, no warning. That changed with a radar computer hybrid called Pathfinder, pioneered by KOTV. Skytube, April 1991.
We were watching Channel 6 Doppler Pathfinder radar, and we feel like that's what saved our life.
If it's the best way we can do it, let's try it.
It was a pretty magical atmosphere, and I don't think well, I've never worked in one like it since, and never will again.
By magical atmosphere, 2020's Bob Brown talks about the 60s and 70s here at KOTV, a time of learning technology, taking chances, and development of what is called long form.
I was able to do stories that, at this point, would be considered magazine story length. And this was long before either 60 Minutes or 2020 went on the air.
Long form then meant 3 film chains tying up engineering for hours and taking as much time as he needed on the news.
Dayton, Tennessee was the scene of one of the most famous and controversial trials in American history, referred to in books as the Scopes trial, but better known simply as the Evolution trial.
The magic was in the writing, the storytelling.
For 1,200 years, this land knew only one people. They called themselves Nimipu. They answered only to the seasons. The mountains and the headwaters were life-giving.
And the magic continues to this day in the Oklahoma Traveler work of Scott Thompson. Coverage of the Oklahoma delegations to the national political conventions began here in 1964 as part of trying to explain the U.S. political process. The inclination to try anything, go anywhere, took us to Vietnam during a war. It let Mike Flynn find pollution in our communities and show how cleaning it up made us all feel better about our town. It let us read letters from the viewers, mostly serious, some over the top, to make TV talk two-way. And speaking of over the top, there was a time, a magical time, when we discovered the news didn't have to be all serious. and a borrowed bowling trophy seemed appropriate for the Academy Award Chug Hole of the Week. Chug Holes came and went, along with the people who brought you the news. It was a fine, fun first 50. Thank you for sharing your time.
This is a Weather Now severe weather update.
Good evening, friends. Meteorologist Jim Giles here. Hope you're enjoying our 50th anniversary special. I want you to know that we're here monitoring the storms. Quick look at it. Advanced Doppler 6. You can see that squall line out to the west of Tulsa. It's moving into Kay and Noble counties right now. Storms not severe, but some pretty heavy thunderstorms at that. We'll monitor it very carefully for you. I'll be back with a complete weekend forecast at 10. See you then.
You're probably a whole lot like I am. When you go someplace for a product, you want two things in particular, good service and nice people. Well, I've got to tell you, I found both of those things in great form here at Cleartone. And I don't even have to yell at Bill anymore when I want him to hear me. It's wonderful to have a product and friends like you'll find when you visit Cleartone. Why don't you do just that?
Cleartone. Energy experts report that most of your home's energy losses are through your windows. Put an end to this expense with custom-made vinyl replacement windows from Mill Creek.
They tilt in for easy cleaning, and each window has multi-paned insulated glass. They're energy efficient in all kinds of weather and will help reduce your monthly bills.
Mill Creek can install these new vinyl replacement windows for as low as $1.99 each.
You can't afford to pass up these savings, and nobody knows windows like Mill Creek Home Improvement.
My employees do right by me, and I try to do right by them. That's why we offer Blue Cross Blue Shield. I get calls from their competitors. They tell me their plans are as comprehensive and as good as Blue Cross, but I'm not going to assume anything. We're sticking with Blue Cross because they do right by me and my employees.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma offers you Oklahoma's largest network of doctors, hospitals, and other healthcare professionals. So when it comes to health insurance, don't assume anything. Always choose Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma.
Do your work boots look like this, but feel like this? If you answered yes, then you know how important a comfortable pair of work boots should be, especially when you're on your feet all day. At Jelko Clothing and Shoes, we'll custom fit the perfect Wolverine work boot for whatever your job requires. Wolverine boots are comfortable, safe, and priced right. Wolverines can even be your best friend on the job. Jelko Clothing and Shoes, served in the Tulsa area for 3 generations, and maybe 4. Our greatest compliment is to be invited into your homes, night after night, year after year. And for half a century now, familiar faces have brought you not only the news, weather, and sports, but memorable entertainment programs as well. Most have moved on. Many of them, along the way, stepped up to national prominence. Through the years, though, theirs are the names and faces that stay with us. The key to any station's success is its people. Bob Howard got us off on the right foot in 1949 with the area's first television newscast. It was 15 minutes long, 4 times a week. Like Bob, most newsmen of the time started in radio and came to television as announcers, then newscasters. Cy Tuma was a favorite.
Our telecast then will continue by means of remote facilities at that point.
Cy had perfect timing as an announcer and a beautiful voice. He'd come from KVOO radio. Most viewers never knew that childhood polio had left Cy a paraplegic.
And he was a neat guy, down to earth, just a dear, sweet man. Walked with a cane, stooped over, but on camera you never knew that.
During the 60s, Bill Hayden hosted and anchored morning and evening newscasts at KOTV. Bill's retired and living in Tulsa today. The 1960s saw more working reporters at KOTV, fewer announcers reading commercials and newscasts.
The voting machines are a lot more complicated in this election.
Jim Hartz was an anchor and news director in the early 1960s. Jim went from Tulsa to anchor in New York City, then to NBC's Today Show, where he was paired with Barbara Walters.
Without the years that I spent at KOTV, probably I couldn't have had the success I had at NBC in New York and in Washington. Or if I did, it would have taken much longer at greater cost and sacrifice.
Today, Jim lives in Virginia, where he's an author and a media consultant.
It was in the fall of 1969 when conditions significantly began.
For years, KOTV viewers enjoyed the smooth sounds of Bill Pitcock. In 1967, Bill went to Vietnam to meet the local boys and get a feel for a war that was falling out of favor on Main Street. Bill eventually left broadcasting to sell real estate. He died of cancer in 1990.
Oklahomans can stake much of their... We've been here a couple of times before.
There are a lot of people out here this weekend.
Other talented journalists began their careers at Channel 6.
You know, we had good teamwork. I don't think anybody got in the way of anybody else, which in this business is kind of unique, and I respected all of them.
We had a great deal of freedom because there was not the pressure that there is now on news.
Television was in a pretty significant transition period, and then we were just at the point where we could become mobile with sound and cameras, and the atmosphere was extremely competitive with the other stations in Tulsa.
Bob Lozier went on to CNN and is now a motivational speaker. Mike Flynn hosts a national public radio program from his Arkansas home. And Bob Brown landed at ABC News.
What do you do about speeding traffic, cars that are...
Women finally got a foothold in the 1960s. Judy Pryor hosted Sun Up and was a reporter. Lee Clark was one of KOTV's first female news reporters. She lives in Oregon today. And maybe you remember Georgia Jones from Channel 6's Noon News.
It's always been nice when people will say, oh, I remember you when you were on television.
Georgia lives today in Tulsa with her family. Weather is important in Oklahoma, always has been, but in Harry Volkman's day, there were no fancy weather gadgets to forecast with, and sometimes Harry would have to fill 15 minutes at a stretch. So he'd memorize the temperatures of 100 cities each day.
People would come up to me on the street and say, in their Oklahoma accent, how do you remember all those temperatures, Harry Volkman? And I'd say, well, I don't have any problem with memory.
Still doesn't, and you can see for yourself if you're ever in Chicago. Al McCutcheon was KOTV's first certified meteorologist, but it was a puppet that folks seem to remember most.
Oh, here he is now. Where have you been? Well, I'm sorry I'm late, but...
Lee Woodward started at Channel 6 in 1957, and after his kids' show was canceled, he simply took King Lionel to the weather department.
King, what have you been doing all these years? Well, I'm still looking for the perfect girl. Yes, perfect mate. Yeah, and you've just never been able to find one. That's right. Had a couple of chances, but, you know, it takes a lot of money. I ain't got any money. He spent it all.
After 26 years at KOTV, Lee left to sell cars in Tulsa. He's still at it, and Lionel's still living in Lee's closet. Jim Giles took over the weather department in 1981.
Swings a fly ball to deep left center. Going back as the center fielder, left fielder.
Channel 6 has always been in a league of its own with sports coverage. Remember our live broadcasts of Tulsa Oilers baseball games? Matt Krieger was behind the mic and on the evening news for 12 years.
Sports was different then. The high schools and some of the other schools didn't like their games telecast. They thought that'd keep people away instead of selling them on the product like it does now.
Hugh Finnerty brought a unique perspective to his sports reporting at Channel 6. He'd been both a baseball player and baseball front office executive. Hugh passed away in 1997. The only place Bill Tegan's ever wanted to work was Channel 6. He got his chance in 1981.
The first day I worked at Channel 6, I can remember walking out the back door that night, and you go out in the back and you see the skyline, you know, of Tulsa, and I thought to myself, it can't get any better than this.
Eventually, Bill gave up that skyline view for the sports director's job at KWTV in Oklahoma City. He's also the radio voice of OSU Cowboy football. The 1980s and 90s brought new faces. Some have moved on, others continue to make their mark here, always mindful of the tradition of quality that paved the way. In front of the camera, he was one of the most entertaining people on KOTV. For more than 40 years, Louis Meyer reviewed books on Channel 6, making the Louis Meyer bookshelf one of the most memorable chapters in KOTV's history.
Let me tell you a story about Mark Twain. Other than being the foremost writer of his day, he was the most demanded after-dinner speaker in America.
His long-running show on KOTV was about books. But people tuned in for far more from Louis Meyer, and he rarely let them down. His book reviews were spontaneous speeches, unrehearsed musings on life, with a bit of literature thrown in, and a lot of humor.
Mark Twain cut his baked potato, buttered it, and took one big bite. Imagine the shock of those fancy people when he spit that potato out on his plate in front of him and looked up and said, "Some damned fools would have swallowed that."
Lewis was an Oklahoma-born summa cum laude law graduate who loved books far more than lawyering. He began doing reviews across the country in the 40s. Around the same time, he married the woman he loved for more than 44 years, Natasha. The two opened a bookstore on South Peoria in 1952. Not long after, he debuted the Lewis Meyer Bookshelf on Channel 6. It became the longest-running book show in America. Lewis the bookseller inevitably became the author of 7 books, including the million-copy sellers Preposterous Papa and Off the Sauce. He was a born performer, shining in his weekly reviews and on several national TV appearances, such as this holiday gift segment on CBS This Morning.
Happy holiday to you, dear.
Now, we know you're in the business of selling books, but convince us this morning of why we should consider giving books for the holiday.
Oh, well, I'm glad you asked that, because, first of all, a book is so personal. A person receives a book, and most people keep them for a lifetime.
In 1994, the Meyers received sudden notice to vacate their Brookside store. Customers were devastated, but Lewis called it a grand opportunity and reopened in a new location soon after. Channel 6 was there for the opening.
Does this look like an adverse thing, or is this a challenge, or is it an obstacle? I had that obstacle, but this is the answer. This is the challenge, and it's so beautiful.
Lewis was on the air for less than a year after that. He died of a heart attack in January 1995. KOTV has not replaced Lewis Meyer's program. He was, after all, a nearly impossible act to follow.
I thought about this on my first show, and I think about it again today. Remember, the more books you read, the taller you grow. Goodbye, and I'll see you next Sunday.
TV changed us. The way we live, the way we think, the way we decorate. That's still to come. But next, some of the memorable CBS shows we grew up watching.
Hi, I'm Bob Howard. When I first started speaking for Clear Tone, people would ask me if I really wore a hearing aid, and I'd show them, and they'd say I didn't think so. And then I would pull out the capsule and say, yes, I do. I am glad to be wearing this hearing aid because it helps me so much. And it's made right here in Tulsa at Clear Tone. Give them a call.
Clear Tone.
To aid in the quest for perfect powder,
Woo! What a weekend.
Voice Stream gives you more.
Best powder ever.
Free weekends nationwide.
I know it's the best.
Call anyone, anywhere in the country.
Because I called everywhere. Utah, Colorado, Vermont.
And get more with Voice Stream.
Woo!
Guaranteed.
I'm telling you, Bob, this is the snow. On the other hand, maybe you should go to Maine.
So call 1-888-STREAMS.
Hello.
It is a feeling of knowing you haven't paid too much for carpeting and rugs. Many can talk about selection. Some can talk about quality. Yet few can talk about all of this, an extraordinary customer satisfaction that is guaranteed. This is the beautiful Karastan collection at Mill Creek, where you will find hundreds of carpets and rugs, heirlooms of tomorrow, at unbelievable prices. Come, see what everyone is talking about. Karastan, beautiful Karastan at Mill Creek.
At PSO, we know how frustrating it can be when you're trying to make contact with someone, but you're just not quite able to hook up. That's why our PSO call center is manned 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, so you can reach us anytime to schedule a service call, ask questions about your bill, report an outage, whatever. Because as your power company, PSO believes that one of the best things we can do is give you the power to connect.
When my husband got really sick, he needed to see a specialist. Our Blue Cross had always helped us before, so we called them. Well, they told us not to worry because they've got the largest network of doctors and hospitals in the whole state. Sure enough, we got the specialist we wanted. You know, it's really comforting to be able to count on your health insurance when you really need it.
When it comes to health insurance, don't assume anything. Always choose Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma.
In the TV business, KOTV is well known for its pioneering firsts, both in front of the camera and behind it. The people who made it so are the people you don't even know. The people who, to this very day, keep us in the forefront of broadcasting technology. They are pioneers too. Oil man George Cameron brought northeastern Oklahoma its first television station. Cameron, a native Texan, knew getting a TV station on its feet would be expensive, but he was determined to see it through. He wasn't alone in his investment. The nation's first and only woman chief executive in the television industry at that time had a $10,000 interest in the station. Maria Helen Alvarez and her partners eventually bought Cameron out, but it was the pioneering spirit of both that brought TV to T-Town. Another pioneer set a time record for getting KOTV's transmitter on the air. Chief engineer George Jacobs was at that time the only man who had built 4 TV stations. Jacobs set the antenna up in his own backyard to check it before hoisting it to the top of the National Bank of Tulsa building. 2 years after KOTV went on the air, it introduced a new mobile unit, a $100,000 television station on wheels. It brought live pictures of parades, fairs, news, sporting events, and other special occasions.
I like the remotes. We used to go out of town. We went everywhere. Channel 6 went every place.
Then in 1952, a new era dawned in Tulsa television. The cable had come. Not cable television as we know it today, but the cable that would carry live network television programs. It was coast-to-coast TV, a chance for viewers to see history as it happened, and live Hollywood shows. As Channel 6 launched its 6th year, it celebrated a power tower boost.
Participate in your operation, high power, high tower. It's a very catchy phrase, I think, and one which has a real meaning.
People from 4 states called to say they were seeing a clear-as-a-bell, snow-free reception. The tower just north of Sand Springs was the 5th tallest man-made structure in the world.
This is a new landmark on Big Heart Mountain, dwarfing almost all of the world's most famous structures, making the Eiffel Tower and the Washington Monument look up. This is a symbol for all to see, ladies and gentlemen.
People came for miles around just to look up at it. It would be up above the clouds a lot of times.
George Jacobs again proved his incredible talent as an engineer.
The guiding genius behind this entire plant, whom you'll meet a little bit later on, is Mr. George Jacobs. I think he has done an outstanding job.
And this particular one we're looking at is the visual amplifier.
This takes the picture out.
That's the one that finally delivers the picture to the antenna.
Fine, George.
Another first at KOTV was a revolution on reels. The station was the first in Oklahoma and among the first in the nation to install the finest videotape recording equipment. First in 1958, then in 1983 when smaller, lighter videotape Betacams revolutionized television news. And when it came to studio cameras, we had some of the best too, even if they did go out of control on occasion.
But then we had the old Evershed, remember?
Oh, the Evershed.
That was fun. Remote control camera.
And they'd go berserk, and they'd be on the air, and all of a sudden the camera would be off somewhere else, looking at something else. And
Channel 6 also had the most up-to-date lenses fronting those cameras.
The kid was running the camera. He put on the wrong lens. As he's trucking along here, he was wiping off all the pies on the bottom tier of the camera lens.
Pies that were prepared in KOTV's ultra-modern telecast kitchen and seen at home on a double mirror setup, engineered right here at KOTV to give viewers a bird's-eye view of the food that tasted as good as it looked.
Well, the best part we got to eat.
Yeah, that was good, too. Well, you guys, I was out with the transmitter all those years.
It was good, I tell you.
I'd watch it, and I think, well, those guys are going to enjoy that.
Yeah, I thought about you all the time.
Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah.
When the guys behind the scenes weren't enjoying the food, they were calling the shots in the control room, announcing the station ID, or operating the boom mic.
Especially if somebody had a person over here and a person over there, and this says one word, and this says another word, and you go,
And out in the field, men like Ron Hagler, Pat Odell, and Henry Lyle brought you some of the best news coverage around.
He and I would go out in the middle of the night. I mean, it could be a trash fire. It didn't matter. Henry'd call, and I'd go, yeah, Henry, come on by. Pick me up. Let's go. Because we were so into immediate breaking news.
Through the years, the names and faces behind the scenes have changed. The boom mic has given way to one without wires. The remote truck to a revolutionary satellite truck, and the old transmitter to a brand new $1 million one that went online just this year. It provides a crisper, clearer, more powerful signal that should serve us well into the future. Through the years, you've enjoyed unforgettable shows on CBS. How about I Love Lucy, The Honeymooners, MASH? KOTV has always meant CBS in these parts, and CBS has always meant the greatest shows and the brightest stars. See if you don't agree.
What are you doing?
Just brushing up on a little dancing, that's all. You wanted me to be a dancer, so
Go on, Mr. Sands, tell us.
Your next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Like he expects us to give her a drum roll and a 21-gun salute.
Well, Rob, at your age, I really can't complain too much.
How do you do, sir?
You're probably a whole lot like I am. When you go someplace for a product, you want two things in particular, good service and nice people. Well, I've got to tell you, I found both of those things in great form here at Cleartone. And I don't even have to yell at Bill anymore when I want him to hear me. It's wonderful to have a product and friends like you'll find when you visit Cleartone. Why don't you do just that? Cleartone.
Son needed emergency surgery. It was 2 in the morning. We must have been about 800 miles away from home. My kid's doing okay now, thanks to some great doctors. We're sure glad we had Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma offers you the largest network in the state. More doctors, more hospitals and healthcare professionals, more choices. So when it comes to health insurance, don't assume anything. Always choose Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma.
At PSO, we've served the electrical needs of our customers here for almost 80 years now. But we also serve broader needs by contributing to the education of our children, by supporting cultural events in our communities, and by working hand in hand with business and government to strengthen our economy. Because at PSO, we believe one of the best things about being your power company is having the power to do good.
Energy experts report that most of your home's energy losses are through your windows. Put an end to this expense with custom-made vinyl replacement windows from Mill Creek. They tilt in for easy cleaning, and each window has multi-paned insulated glass. They're energy efficient in all kinds of weather and will help reduce your monthly bills. Mill Creek can install these new vinyl replacement windows for as low as $1.99 each. You can't afford to pass up these savings, and nobody knows windows like Mill Creek Home Improvement.
It's the bottom of the ninth. The ball game at Woodcraft Furniture is over. Woodcraft is going out of business and must liquidate over $20 million of the finest home furnishings. Step up to the plate for incredible savings on hundreds of living rooms, dining rooms, bedrooms, and much, much more. Every piece of fine quality home furnishings in our 3-acre showroom has been reduced to up to 75% off. Everyone hits a home run during this liquidation. Hurry before the final inning of the going out of business total liquidation event is over. Woodcraft Furniture, 5000 South Sheridan in Tulsa.
KOTV's 50th anniversary, brought to you by Public Service Company of Oklahoma, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Oklahoma, and Clear Toe.
Critics said it would never last, but before long the TV craze seemed to be taking over all of our lives. In the early days, newspaper articles would tell us how to tune a television set in, how to decorate a room around it, how to entertain guests with it.
TV forever changed the habits of the American family. It gave us TV dinners, TV trays, TV guide. Suddenly, everyone had a ringside seat to the celebrations and tragedies around the world.
We used to sit and watch Test Pattern because that's all it was on.
And then when the test pattern started moving, you know, when there was a little sailboat that would go across the screen, that was a really big deal.
People thought at first television was just a fad, but it was so interesting and it caught on to so many people.
Right from the beginning, Tulsans were fascinated with this thing called television. Tulsa appliance dealers sold 3,500 TV sets in time for KOTV's inaugural broadcast. Within 3 years, the number of sets skyrocketed to almost 78,000. Each one carefully tuned to catch those shadowy images that floated almost by magic right into our living rooms. Some of the glitter rubbed off on everyone who helped bring that magic to life.
In the beginning, when you said you worked at a television station, it was almost like you were a movie star.
Along with cooking shows, musical acts, and a bit of news, we somehow sensed there was real power coming from this little box. Tulsa newspapers devoted entire sections to the fledgling new medium. Today, some of those early writings seem almost uncanny. What will television do to Oklahoma politics, asked the Tulsa Tribune? Will the searching television cameras produce a new type of handsome candidates with charming manners, wavy hair, winning smiles, and soothing voices? And what of our families, our children? We radiated optimism as we basked in that first blue glow of the tube.
Long live the cause of freedom.
How are you going to keep them down on the farm now that they've seen Paris? Why, television, of course. Newspapers proclaimed lonely farmhouses would be transformed into entertainment centers. Farm help would be easier to get, farm wives more content, and farmers themselves would rush through their chores, eager for a night of television. As for city folks, parents were assured TV was a good influence on youth, perhaps even the answer to juvenile delinquency. One delighted Methodist minister proclaimed the television set the finest thing available to the church to hold the interest of young people. And don't worry if little Junior complains of a headache, he's just learning a new skill. Wishful thinking? Not entirely.
No, it started as a family thing.
ORU journalism professor Evan Culp vividly remembers television's arrival in his home in the early 1950s.
We came together to watch it. The idea is when we finish dinner and get done with doing the dishes, let's all sit down and watch TV together.
Housewives were urged to make the most of this newfound family time. Decorators advised that television would replace the fireplace as the focal point of any well-run home, and a whole new concept of furniture came into being. Special chairs that fold, tilt, stack, or revolve, and all shapes and sizes of television stools are now available, boasted the Tulsa Daily World in November of 1949. Some home builders were even bold enough to include television corners in their new construction. Today, building with the eye of the TV in mind is a given. Developer Ed Lineback is in the process of taking technology to the next level in this apartment complex in South Tulsa. Every unit will be wired for high-speed internet access, but that doesn't mean television is left behind.
And we now install a television in every kitchen.
And beyond the kitchen, cable outlets will dot every wall.
Well, you've got at least 2 in every living room, 2 in every bedroom, and 1 in the kitchen. So you've got at least 5, and in a 2-bedroom, you'll have 7.
As television enters middle age, Evan Culp sees the young friend that brought his family together, drawing others apart.
Rather than everyone around one TV, we find that the kids are in their room, the teenagers watching one thing while on the phone. Mother might still be in the den watching another program while sports are on in a bedroom where the dad's watching it.
And as for content,
some of the choices we have are less enriching to the family.
Yet for all the disappointments, there's no denying that television has, in countless ways, lived up to its promise. We have a window on the world that was unimaginable to our great-grandfathers, a ringside seat to sporting events, cultural spectacles, and the life and death struggles of nations. And in times of great joy and great tragedy, nothing can match its power.
Whether that's a royal wedding, stepping on the moon, whether it's a sad thing like the death of a president or a president's son, and those things we feel through love.
We hope the next half-century of television proves to be just as fun and fascinating as the last 50 years have been.
It was a good time. Everybody had fun. We had fun. The crew had fun. The engineers were cracking up back there.
We really enjoyed our jobs.
But we had fun with it.
Working at KOTV probably was the best time in my early life.
And we had a lot of fun.
If you watch television at all, you watch KOTV because we were the only one.
We hope KOTV will continue to be the first you turn to in the future. Thanks for the memories. See you at 75.
Well, thank you, Dean Turner. Now he has me doing it.
The virus called A-Texas apparently is an offspring of the A King Kong, Hong Kong flu that first appeared in this country in 1968. A spokesman at the Center for Disease Control. The State Retirement Fund in trouble coming up next.
Well, they shoot movies in Bixby, don't they? Why don't we come over to this camera? There we go. Clay was taking a brief nap there.
And a lady fainted on me on live television one day. I asked her a question and she went plop, and I thought, good heavens, I've killed her.
Thanks, everybody. You.
But one man made his mark here. During more... the first three... There, I'm glad there's some glare back there, Adam. Take care of that. I'm glad you're always finding a little something. Makes me feel a little better. That darn glare, I can't think of it. 3, 2, 1.